The sun was setting over the quiet edgeworld, painting the sky in orange and violet streaks. The wind swept across the cracked ground, carrying the smell of dry earth and faint salt from the distant sea. In a small, weathered shelter on the side of a hill, a man named Corin worked quietly. He had lived here for years, repairing old machines and growing stubborn crops that barely clung to the rocky soil. Life was simple, lonely, and predictable. Or at least it had been. That evening, as Corin returned from checking his water purifier, he noticed something unusual. A faint shimmer of movement near the edge of his field caught his eye. At first he thought it was a trick of the wind. But then a small figure stepped out into the fading light. It was a dragonling no bigger than a large dog, with scales that glowed faintly in the twilight. Its eyes were wide, nervous, and curious. Corin froze. Dragons were not unknown in the galaxy, but they were rare here, especially this small. This one seemed lost, alone, and cautious. It did not growl, snarl, or attack. Instead, it crouched low, wings slightly raised as if testing the human without trusting him. Corin slowly lowered the water bottle in his hand. "Hey there," he said softly. The dragonling tilted its head, its amber eyes studying him. It blinked once, then retreated a few steps, still keeping him in sight. Corin did not move closer. He did not reach out. He simply set the water down a short distance away. Then, slowly, deliberately, he stepped back into the shadows of his shelter. The dragonling hesitated. Its small claws scraped the dry earth as it approached the water, sniffed it, and finally lapped a few drops. Corin watched silently, heart pounding. No one had seen him here for years. He was not expecting company, especially not of this kind. The night came quickly. Corin lit a small lamp inside his shelter and watched from the doorway. The dragonling curled near the water, alert but calm. It did not sleep. It only watched him. Corin returned inside, quietly preparing a simple meal. Occasionally he glanced out. The dragonling seemed to study everything he did, the way he moved, the care with which he handled tools, the soft way he spoke to himself. It seemed impossible, but he thought he saw understanding in its eyes. The next morning, Corin woke to find the dragonling still near the water. It had not left. He tried to shoo it gently, waving his hand. The dragonling backed a few steps but stayed. Its wings twitched nervously. Corin sighed. "I guess you like me, huh?" he said with a small laugh. The dragonling tilted its head again. It seemed to answer with a soft, almost musical chirp, like a bird. Days passed, and the dragonling returned every morning. Corin began leaving small bits of food, dried meat, fruit from his meager garden. He never approached it directly. He never tried to touch it. Slowly the dragonling grew braver. It would eat closer to him each day, sometimes even lying down near the edge of the field, watching him work as he fixed broken machines or repaired his water systems. Corin found himself talking to it as he worked. "Don't eat that," he said one day, pointing to a metal piece that had fallen from a broken machine. The dragonling paused, looked at him, then stepped back. Another day he hummed softly while planting seeds. The dragonling sat nearby, tilting its head, listening to the tune. The other humans in the galaxy would never have believed this. Dragons did not choose humans. They did not form attachments. They hunted, they fought, they avoided. Yet here was a tiny dragonling that chose to stay, day after day, near a man who barely left his shelter. Corin wondered why. Was it loneliness? Hunger? Or something else he could not understand? One afternoon, a sudden storm swept over the land. Winds tore through the field, scattering loose soil and tossing his tools. Corin hurried to secure his shelter and protect his small crops. He glanced out just in time to see the dragonling struggling against the gusts, its small wings flapping frantically. Without thinking, Corin grabbed a tarp and ran outside, holding it over the dragonling to shield it from the wind. It froze, eyes wide, unsure, but did not flee. The storm raged for hours. The dragonling stayed under the tarp, trembling, while Corin stood beside it, protecting it as best he could. When the storm finally passed, the sky cleared, leaving a rainbow faintly arched over the horizon. The dragonling shook its tiny body, flicking off the last drops of rain. It looked at Corin, and for a long moment neither moved. Then, slowly, it nuzzled his leg, not aggressively, not demanding, but in a quiet, almost grateful way. Corin knelt, gently patting its scaled head. That night, Corin sat by his small lamp, thinking about the dragonling. He had lived on this edgeworld for years and nothing had ever changed. Then came this small creature, wary, alone, and brave enough to keep returning. For the first time in a long while, Corin felt a connection, not just to another being, but to something greater than his lonely life. Days turned into weeks. The Dragonling learned the shelter's rhythms, learning when Corin would be busy, when he would eat, when he would sleep. It began following him short distances as he worked in the fields, but it never demanded attention. It only observed. Corin never tried to train it. He never tried to control it. He simply existed alongside it. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the Dragonling's visits became the highlight of Corin's days. He began looking forward to its chirps and careful glances. He named it Tyron, though the Dragonling did not respond to the name. Still, it seemed to understand that he was friend, not threat. No one knew how long the Dragonling would stay. Perhaps it was just passing through. Perhaps it would vanish without warning. But Corin did not worry. He had learned in these first weeks that trust cannot be forced and loyalty cannot be commanded. The Dragonling chose him. And that, he realized, was enough. As the sun set again over the Edgeworld, Corin stepped outside to watch Tyron stretch its tiny wings in the fading light. He smiled, feeling a quiet warmth in his chest. In this vast, lonely galaxy, a small visitor had found him. And somehow he had found the Dragonling too. The days passed slowly, but for Corin and Tyron, they were filled with small, quiet lessons. The Dragonling had grown more confident. It would follow Corin as he moved around his shelter, but it still kept a careful distance. Its wings stretched fully now, revealing patterns of gold and green scales that glinted in the sunlight. Tyron's eyes were always watching, learning, understanding things Corin did not even notice. Corin was careful too. He did not try to touch Tyron unless it wanted. He did not force food into its mouth or chase it when it ran. Instead, he worked, spoke softly, and moved slowly. Tyron began to notice patterns. The way Corin fed animals, the way he repaired broken machines, the way he carefully planted seeds in the soil. Every movement seemed calm, purposeful, and gentle. It was different from the humans Tyron had seen in the galaxy before. Most humans commanded or fought. This one acted without hurry, without fear, without anger. One morning, Corin was repairing an old water pump. Rusted metal squeaked as he worked. Tyron sat nearby, observing the rhythm of his hands. When Corin dropped a bolt, Tyron nudged it with its snout, nudging it closer to where Corin could reach. Corin looked down, startled, then laughed softly. "You're helping me, huh?" he said. The Dragonling chirped softly, almost proudly, and then returned to watching, as if to say it understood more than words could explain. The Dragonling also learned patience. Sometimes Corin would spend hours repairing a machine that seemed beyond repair. Tyron waited. It did not grow frustrated. It watched him inspect every piece, test every connection, until finally, with a quiet hiss of water or a gentle hum of metal, the machine came alive. Tyron's eyes widened each time as if amazed at the human's skill. There were no fireworks, no roaring engines, just quiet success. That was enough to impress the Dragonling. Food was another lesson. Corin never ate in a hurry. He would slice vegetables carefully, toast bread over a small flame, and drink water with slow, deliberate sips. Sometimes he shared crumbs with Tyron, who learned which foods were safe. The Dragonling tried different things, sometimes with hesitation, sometimes with excitement. Tyron began to understand that Corin did not hoard, he did not waste, he did not fight for resources. Everything was shared calmly and fairly. One afternoon, Corin found a small injured bird near his shelter. Its wing was twisted at an odd angle. Tyron's eyes followed every movement as Corin gently wrapped the bird in soft cloth, placed it in a small crate, and fed it water drop by drop. "It will heal," Corin whispered. "You just need patience." Tyron chirped softly and stayed close. It did not touch the bird, but it seemed to understand the care Corin offered. Later, when the bird flew away, Tyron tilted its head in what seemed like respect. Storms came often on the Edgeworld, sudden and fierce. Corin always secured his shelter first, but Tyron noticed something else. He checked loose tools, tied down crates, and even reinforced the fragile walls with extra planks. The Dragonling watched how Corin acted without panic, without loud anger, without forcing others to do his work. Corin's calm in danger taught Tyron a lesson no one else ever had. Courage is quiet, not loud. Strength is not always shown in fire or claws. Tyron also learned about kindness. When Corin repaired an old, broken fence, he paused to mend a small nest of animals nearby instead of destroying it to finish his work faster. He sang softly to himself as he worked, humming melodies that drifted on the wind. The Dragonling began to hum too, low and soft, a sound that matched Corin's song. For the first time, the little Dragonling understood that humans could be gentle, patient, and protective without needing to dominate. One day, a strange noise came from the horizon. A faint shimmer of light, distant engines, something moving too fast to be natural. Tiran froze. Corin did not panic. He continued working, calmly checking his machines and reinforcing the shelter. The Dragonling learned something critical in that moment. Humans were not always loud or violent to face danger. Sometimes they prepared quietly, carefully, and waited. That quiet courage mattered more than any roar or flame. By the third week, Tiran began following Corin closer than ever. It walked beside him when he watered crops, crouched nearby when he repaired tools, and sometimes even rested near the doorway of the shelter at night. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dark, always observing, always learning. Tiran was learning not just what humans were but what they could be: protectors, helpers, patient friends. Corin noticed the change too. He realized the Dragonling was growing attached, learning and trusting him. He smiled softly, adjusting his hat. "You're smarter than most people I've met," he said. Tiran chirped back, almost as if answering. It had learned to recognize Corin's voice, to understand his tone, and to respond in its own small way. There was no fear, only quiet connection. Sometimes, Corin would talk about the galaxy, about distant planets and stars. Tiran would listen, tilting its head as if understanding some pieces of the story. It was learning not just from actions but from words and tone. Even without speaking its own language, the Dragonling began to understand lessons in care, patience, and calm bravery that no one else had taught it. And yet, despite all the learning, Tiran remained cautious. It never strayed too far from the edge of the field. It still slept with one eye open. But every day, it inched closer to trust, closer to understanding, and closer to friendship. Corin often watched it at night, thinking quietly. The galaxy was full of humans who sought power and fear. But here, in this quiet place, one human showed something different. He did not command. He did not fight to rule. He lived simply, helped others, and protected life without asking for reward. Tiran was learning that lesson faster than anyone, and that was why it kept returning. As the sun set on another quiet day, Corin and Tiran sat near the small lamp by the shelter. Tiran rested its head lightly on its paws, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Corin smiled, knowing that even a small Dragonling could learn trust and kindness, and that perhaps it had already begun teaching him something in return. The Edgeworld was quiet, the stars bright, and in that calm, the Dragonling learned more than it ever had in the wild. It was learning that humans were capable of courage, patience, and care in ways the galaxy had rarely seen. And slowly, carefully, Tiran began to understand that Corin's quiet life was a life worth following, and maybe a life worth staying for. The Edgeworld was quiet in the early morning, but Tiran sensed something was wrong. The wind carried strange sounds, distant hums of machines, and flashes of light flickered along the horizon. The Dragonling stiffened, ears and wings alert. It had never felt this before, an uneasy feeling that something large and unfamiliar was coming. Tiran's tail flicked, and its eyes darted toward Corin, who was tending his small garden. Corin noticed Tiran's behavior immediately. He had learned to read the Dragonling's subtle signals. Its muscles were tight, wings twitching slightly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "What is it now?" he murmured, wiping soil from his hands. He walked to the edge of the hill and scanned the sky. Nothing yet, but he trusted Tiran's instincts. Sometimes the small Dragonling saw things before anyone else could. That afternoon the hum grew louder. Tiran became restless, pacing near the edge of the field, low growls rumbling in its throat. Corin stayed calm. He began preparing quietly, moving tools, reinforcing the shelter, securing food and water. He did not panic, he did not shout. Instead, he worked with care and precision, methodically checking every corner of his small property. Tiran watched him closely, learning. The Dragonling had seen humans in cities, on ships, and in other worlds, but none had acted like Corin. Others often reacted with fear, anger, or panic. Corin did not. He acted quietly, carefully, without causing more danger. Tiran began to understand something important. Humans could be brave and protective without being loud or violent. Courage could be calm, steady, and deliberate. As evening fell, strange shapes appeared on the horizon. Small scout ships glinted in the setting sun. Corin saw them too, but he did not run. He quietly pulled metal panels to cover fragile equipment, moved crates to block wind, and reinforced doors and windows. Tiran stayed close, watching every move. The Dragonling chirped softly, almost as if asking, "Will you protect us?" Corin nodded without words. The scout ships landed near the base of the hill, small engines whirring as figures stepped out. Corin remained hidden, watching. Tiran hissed softly, wings raised, ready to react. But Corin did not attack. He had no weapons, no traps, no desire for conflict. He only prepared his home and stayed calm. The scouts moved through the area, scanning, poking at the ground, searching for signs of life. But Corrin had done his work well. There was nothing to find, nothing to steal, nothing to exploit. Tiran chirped in relief as the scouts left after a few hours. The Dragonling had learned another lesson: humans could protect without fighting. Sometimes the safest path was quiet preparation and patience. Corrin had taught it that by example. Tiran also began to trust humans more. Not all humans sought power. Some, like Corrin, simply lived their lives, protecting what mattered without demanding control. That night, Corrin and Tiran sat near the shelter's small lamp. The Dragonling curled close to him but kept one eye open, scanning the stars. "You see a lot, don't you?" Corrin said softly. Tiran chirped as if agreeing. The human spoke quietly about far-off worlds, about how humans often fought and ruled, but sometimes lived simply and wisely. Tiran listened, absorbing everything, learning lessons no dragon had learned before. The next few days brought more signs. Strange noises echoed across the hills, shadows passed where there should be none, and distant engines hummed faintly. Tiran became increasingly anxious, pacing, chirping, and occasionally flapping its wings in warning. Corrin noticed, but he did not overreact. He calmly reinforced his shelter, moved food supplies closer, and checked for weak spots. He taught Tiran by example once again. Fear was natural, but it did not have to control actions. One morning, Corrin found Tiran circling a broken fence near the edge of the field. Its wings were raised, eyes focused on the horizon. Corrin followed its gaze and saw the faint glint of metal in the distance, moving slowly, like it was scanning for life. He nodded quietly. "I see it," he said. "But we are ready." Tiran chirped softly, and for the first time, it flew briefly to a higher vantage point, circling and watching the horizon. It was learning to observe, to warn, and to trust Corrin's calm judgment. Even with the scouts gone, Corrin remained vigilant. He repaired tools, reinforced walls, and kept watch at night. Tiran followed him, learning every detail. When small animals ran into the shelter seeking refuge from storms, Corrin helped them without hesitation. Tiran observed how humans could protect others without seeking reward or recognition. It began to understand that courage was not always loud, kindness was not always rewarded, and patience could save lives. After a week, the Edgeworld returned to quiet. The strange noises stopped, and the scout ships did not return immediately. But Tiran remained watchful. It had learned the importance of preparation and observation. The Dragonling realized that the galaxy was full of dangers humans might not even see, but some humans could handle them quietly, effectively, and wisely. Corrin had become a teacher without speaking lessons, showing through action what humans were capable of. One evening, Tiran perched on a high rock, looking down at Corrin working in the field. The Dragonling chirped, almost as if asking, "Will it always be like this? Will danger always come?" Corrin paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and smiled. "Sometimes," he said softly. "But we do what we can and we stay calm. That is enough." Tiran watched him, absorbing the lesson once more. By the end of the week, Tiran had learned more than it had in all its months in the wild. Humans could be clever, calm, and brave in ways dragons did not expect. They could act without violence, prepare without panic, and protect without control. Tiran's trust in Corrin grew stronger. It began following him more closely, even helping in small ways, like nudging tools or watching the edges of the field for unusual movement. And as night fell, Corrin and Tiran sat side by side, watching the stars appear. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown dangers, and few humans had learned the lessons that mattered most. But here, on this quiet Edgeworld, a small Dragonling had begun to understand the true nature of courage, patience, and trust. It had learned that not all humans ruled through power. Some ruled through quiet strength, and that strength was far more dangerous than fire. Tiran curled up near Corrin's feet, one eye open, scanning the horizon. It had learned much, but the Dragonling also knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy held larger threats, challenges no dragon had yet faced, and soon Tiran would have to decide whether to trust its instincts, or to follow the human who had taught it so much. Corrin had grown used to Tiran's presence, but that morning, the Dragonling was restless in a way he had never seen. Its wings twitched constantly, and its tail lashed against the ground. The air felt heavier, charged, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Corrin looked toward the horizon, expecting nothing, yet feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. A low rumble began beneath the ground. At first, Corrin thought it was a quake, but the vibration was steady, growing stronger by the second. Tiran's wings lifted fully, scales bristling, and it chirped sharply, flying a short distance to the top of a hill for a better view. Corin's heart pounded. He had prepared for scouts, storms, and small dangers, but this was unlike anything he had imagined. The rumble grew louder, shaking loose stones and small plants. Then, in the distance, a shadow moved over the hills, stretching wide across the field. Corin squinted, adjusting his eyes. One figure emerged at first, then another and another, dozens of shapes moving steadily across the land. Tiran cried out, a long musical call, and flew low to circle above Corin. Its small voice carried both warning and awe. The first dragon that arrived was huge, wings wider than any building Corin had ever seen. Its scales shimmered in colors that seemed to change with the light: blue, green, gold, and red. It stopped at the edge of the field and tilted its head, studying Corin. More dragons followed, of all sizes: teenagers with curious eyes, elders with deep, knowing expressions, and mothers with hatchlings tucked carefully under their wings. The ground trembled with each step of the approaching herd. Corin stayed where he was. He did not run. He did not wave or call for help. He simply watched, his hands steady at his sides. Tiran landed gently beside him, rubbing its head against his leg in reassurance. The herd spread across the field but did not charge. They moved calmly, silently judging the human who had cared for their youngest. One of the elder dragons stepped forward, its amber eyes locking onto Corin's. Corin took a slow breath, remembering the lessons he had taught Tiran through quiet patience and care. He kept his hands open, palms visible, and spoke softly. I do not want to fight you. I only wanted to help your young one. I only wanted to live in peace. The elder dragon lowered its head slightly, and the air seemed to shift. Tiran chirped in delight, nudging Corin's hand. The smaller dragons relaxed their wings and crouched closer to the ground. They were curious, not hostile. Corin realized that the dragons had come not to attack, but to judge him. They had come to decide if he was worthy of trust. As the sun climbed higher, the herd spread across the field, sniffing, observing, and occasionally chirping. Tiran ran to meet them, darting between their legs, chirping joyfully. The herd responded with gentle hisses and soft taps of their claws. It was a moment Corin had never imagined. Dragons moving freely on the ground, calm and cooperative, all centered around one human who had shown nothing but care. Corin moved slowly among them, careful not to startle any of the dragons. He offered food, which they sniffed cautiously before accepting. Some of the younger dragons touched him lightly with their snouts, testing, curious. Corin's heart swelled. He had never sought power, never demanded loyalty, never tried to control anyone. And yet here they were. They had chosen him and Tiran as a safe presence in the galaxy. Hours passed and the dragons began to settle. They curled near the edges of the shelter, resting, watching, and occasionally looking up at Corin. The small dragonling had grown proud, chirping frequently, flying among the herd and calling out small warnings when a gust of wind or distant noise approached. It had learned from Corin and was teaching the others, showing them the human's calm courage and careful hands. Corin took a deep breath. He had always thought of himself as a simple man, living quietly, unnoticed. He had repaired machines, grown crops, and protected animals without ever thinking of grandeur. And yet, here was a dragon herd, massive and powerful, trusting him. They were not tamed or forced, they had chosen. Corin realized that the galaxy might never understand this kind of power. True strength was in calmness, patience, and care. As night fell, the herd remained on the field, not restless, not aggressive. Their bodies glimmered faintly in the moonlight, scales shimmering like stars scattered across the land. Corin lit a small lamp in the shelter, and the dragons watched it quietly, curious but not fearful. Tiran curled at his feet, tired but proud. Corin patted its head gently. You did well, he whispered. We did well. In that quiet moment, Corin felt the weight of the galaxy's misunderstanding lift. He did not need fleets or weapons, strategies or politics. He only needed patience, kindness, and quiet courage. That had been enough to earn the trust of the most powerful creatures in the galaxy. And now they were here. The ground had trembled that day, not from destruction but from arrival. A herd of dragons, powerful beyond imagination, had come to a single human's field, and they had come in peace. Corin watched them as they slept, wings folded, heads resting gently on their own paws or on the ground. The world had shifted in a single day. A small man on a quiet edgeworld had changed the understanding of dragons, if only for this herd. Corin stepped back into his shelter, Tiran following closely. He did not speak because no words could capture the moment. The dragonling chirped softly, a small song of triumph and joy, curling beside him. Corrin smiled, exhausted but calm. They had faced the unknown, and through patience, trust, and quiet action, they had survived it. Not with fire, not with weapons, but with care and respect. As the stars appeared above the Edgeworld, Corrin realized something he had never thought before. The galaxy might never know the story of this day. But the dragons did. And for them it was enough. The Edgeworld was quiet once more, but the tremor of the dragon herd's arrival still lingered in the ground and in Corrin's heart. 4 days the dragons remained near his shelter, curious but calm, watching him as he went about his work. Tyron ran among them, chirping and nudging, guiding the younger dragons closer, showing them that this human meant no harm. Corrin had never sought recognition, power, or glory, but the galaxy would soon notice anyway, though far too late. News traveled slowly across the stars. Scouts and traders reported sightings of enormous dragons on a remote planet, and rumors spread quickly through outposts and space stations. Governments, corporations, and militaries were suddenly alert. Fleets began moving toward the Edgeworld. Scientists and explorers wanted to study, control, or capture the dragons. But when they arrived, they found something that no one expected. The dragons did not attack. They did not flee. They did not roar or breathe fire. They remained calm, spreading across the field, watching the humans from a distance, but never threatening. Corrin walked among them with Tyron at his side, moving slowly and deliberately, careful not to provoke fear or aggression. The dragons had learned from him and they trusted him. Their presence was not a threat, it was a testament to patience, kindness, and quiet courage. The leaders of the fleets did not understand at first. They expected fear, submission, or destruction. But the dragons ignored blasters, ignored scanners, ignored nets and cages. They only observed, gently nudged, and occasionally moved closer to Tyron and Corrin. No human had ever won the trust of a dragon herd in this way. No fleet, no weapon, no authority could force what Corrin had earned through calm actions and care. Corrin refused to speak to the fleets, refused to give orders, and refused rewards. He had no interest in fame or power. He only wanted the dragons to be safe and Tyron to be happy. And yet, the galaxy watched and learned. Military commanders realized that humans could be strong without armies, brave without weapons, and valuable without ruling. The quiet life of a single human had shown a truth that no one in the galaxy had fully understood. Trust, care, and patience could create bonds stronger than fear or force. As days turned into weeks, the dragons made Corrin's shelter a safe ground. Mothers rested with their hatchlings, elders surveyed the horizon, and Tyron darted from one dragon to another, chirping, teaching, and guiding. Corrin repaired machines, tended his crops, and shared small meals with the dragons. No one told him to act this way. He did not command them. He simply lived as he always had, gently, calmly, responsibly. And the dragons chose to stay. A few humans from nearby settlements came to visit, curious and cautious. They saw the dragons resting quietly, the calm human walking among them, and Tyron flying from one dragon to another. They realized that Corrin's strength was not in controlling the dragons. It was in respecting them. They took notes, whispered among themselves, and began to understand that humans were capable of more than aggression or dominance. A single human alone had taught a herd of dragons the value of patience, respect, and trust. Eventually the fleets departed, frustrated but awed. They could not capture, command, or provoke the dragons. They reported back to their leaders, but no report could fully explain what they had seen. The galaxy learned a lesson too late. Humans were not the strongest because of weapons or fleets. They were strong because of responsibility, empathy, and the quiet courage to act when no one else would. Corrin returned to his simple life. He repaired broken tools, harvested his crops, and tended his animals. But the dragons remained. Tyron stayed near him, guiding the herd as they rested, hunted, or played nearby. Mothers brought their hatchlings close when storms came. Elder dragons shifted positions to shield the shelter from wind. No human had ever commanded such respect through care alone. The dragons had chosen him and they would remain loyal to that choice. Word of Corrin's deeds spread slowly through stories, rumors, and whispers. In some places people laughed, thinking it impossible. In other places humans took note. Kindness and patience could accomplish more than fleets and weapons. Some settlers on other worlds began acting differently, caring for wildlife, protecting animals, and avoiding conflict when possible. Corrin had not set out to teach, but his actions were teaching across the stars. Tyron chirped softly one evening as Corrin sat outside, watching the sun set over the Edgeworld. The dragons rested in the field, wings folded, eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. Corrin smiled, tired but calm. "We did it," he whispered. Tyron nudged his hand with its snout, chirping a soft, proud song. The dragons, the galaxy, and even the distant stars had witnessed something rare and powerful. Trust, patience, and quiet courage could change worlds, even if no one expected it. As night fell, the herd remained on the field, calm and protective. Corrin went inside his shelter, leaving Tyron curled at the doorway. The stars above twinkled like scattered jewels, and the galaxy, vast and full of danger, had learned a truth that it had ignored for too long. Strength was not always loud. True strength could be quiet, kind, and steady, and it could earn loyalty that armies never could. For Corrin there was no pride, no triumph, no desire for fame. He simply lived, repaired, and cared. For the dragons there was peace and trust. And for the galaxy, there was a lesson it would remember, though it had come too late for some. The human heart, steady and patient, could shape the universe more than fire or steel ever could. The Edgeworld was quiet once again. Tyron chirped softly, and the dragons rested in the moonlight, safe and calm. Corrin sat on the doorstep of his shelter, watching the stars. He had learned a lesson too. Sometimes the smallest actions, the quietest decisions, and the calmest heart could change everything. And in this quiet corner of the galaxy, humans had shown that their greatest power was not in ruling, but in caring, and that power could move even dragons to trust them.